Good morning, everybody, or afternoon if it is afternoon for you. There's big news out of the Senate. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Tom Howard, and this is another very special episode of... Once again, my name is Tom Howard. Thank you so much for joining us in Cannabis Legalization News. We have some big news out of the Senate. There's a whole bunch of senators that are tweeting regarding their desires to legalize cannabis in 2021. Is it going to happen? I'm not sure, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. So give us a thumbs up and a like, subscribe, whatever, if you enjoy Cannabis Legalization News. Tune in tomorrow. We'll give an update on West Virginia because somebody asked for that. So let's go ahead and dive into it. We posted it on our LinkedIn page. And if you haven't gone over to our LinkedIn page, you should. You can. It's Cannabis Legalization News on LinkedIn. We only have 670 odd people that like it. And then you can click over to the story that we have on Marijuana Moment. Big shout out to Marijuana Moment. It came out yesterday. And so there are all these leading champions in the Senate that say that they are going to advance cannabis legalization. For example, Ron Wyden tweeted, "We can't address our country's racial inequality crisis without ending the outdated, dangerous war on drugs and its disproportionate impact on Black and brown Americans." And then he starts tweeting at people. Ooh, exciting. At Senator Schumer and at Senator Booker and I are going to introduce legislation to do just that. That's fantastic. So do you think that there's actually going to be some type of vote anytime soon on the MORE Act? Well, probably not, because the MORE Act of 2019 is no more. The MORE Act of 2021 has perhaps already been introduced into the Senate or into the House, and then they are going to vote on it. I perceive this to be a political issue in the sense that the last time it was voted on in the House of Representatives, not only did it pass, but it passed essentially against party lines. Approximately 95% of the Democrats voted in favor, and approximately 95% of the Republicans voted opposed. If you want more than that, go dig into our videos and you'll be able to see when Miggy and I were live watching and counting the votes of the MORE Act when it was voted on in the House of Congress. So now that the Senate is going to get involved, do you really think that it's going to move quickly? No, I don't. But Senator Schumer then goes ahead and tweets out, "The war on drugs has been a war on people, in particular people of color. Ending the federal marijuana prohibition is necessary to right the wrongs of this failed war." I want you to know the ironic thing is that he is the senator from New York, which has no legal weed. And then Senator Booker, New Jersey, finally got legal weed, kind of, not still. They voted on it, but I don't think they've passed the bill yet. They're getting closer. I really thought that I would spit out my gum before I was able to get live on here. Just a small moment. You know, I have not gotten a chance to smoke weed at all today. I have just been slammed with these 10-day notices. They're really starting to shape up nicely. We have the transporter ones. Basically, if you got your social equity points, you did get your transporter application license. There might have been some errors in your Illinois residency points and or the types of proof that you put to the state. I was not thrilled that the state used to say tax records, which presumably could have meant real estate tax records that indicated that, you know, you own the real estate in the particular area and that perhaps you also live there as it's listed as your address. But no, they said only income tax records and only pages 1 and 2 of Illinois Form 1040. And so I've just been going gangbusters. What do we think is actually going to happen here is Senator Booker, he tweets out the failed war on drugs has been a war on people, particularly the people of color. Sounds a lot like Senator Schumer's tweet. And that he's looking forward to joining Ron Wyden and Senator Schumer to announce reforms that will ensure restorative justice and protect public health. That is fantastic. Now, what's the likelihood that this is actually going to happen right now? Not very good. You want to know why? Because there's budgets and there's coronavirus relief that's getting negotiated right now in the Senate. Oh, I think they were also going to impeach that one guy that used to be president when they already impeached him, but I think he has to go to trial really, really quickly. Just a second. I know I'm not supposed to do this on camera, so I'm going to give myself a small bumper. Why don't we check the stocks? I guess they're still doing fine. Okay. Oh, suddenly I feel a lot more refreshed. But the Senate will actually be moving on this in some way, shape, or form. The Senate will probably move on it after the House, in my opinion, simply because the Senate goes a lot slower. And then I think they're going to try to politicize this. I think they're going to try to politicize this because it was effective in Georgia, and they're going to be using it for the 2020 election. For example, going into the 2020 election, what if the House does what the House did before and it passes the MORE Act, or the whatever version of the MORE Act will be introduced by Senator Booker, Senator Wyden, and Senator Schumer? Well, after that happens, if it's passed in the House and go over to the Senate. Now, if just one Democrat doesn't vote it for it, or imagine if one Democrat votes against it and one Republican votes for it, still passes, right? We have Vice President Kamala Harris that could cast the deciding vote. Probably not. I don't think it's going to be that close, mostly because it's not a plurality even, or a majority of the states that have legal cannabis, legal adult use cannabis. It's fantastic. Your state should try it sometime. But it's only like 15 states right now. And so that's just not a majority of the population. However, if they use it and they try and it's stymied, let's say, by Republicans, and the Republicans vote 97% against the MORE Act leading into an election year of 2022, I think the Democrats are going to try to politicize it so that they don't lose additional seats and perhaps make up some ground that way. I just think that the 50-50 Senate, especially with the political capital that Joe Biden and his administration wants to use right now, principally on the coronavirus reform, means that criminal justice reform, while coming, and that's exactly what the cannabis legalization bill is going to be. It's a criminal justice reform bill more than it's about legalizing weed. And so will that happen? Sure. When? Yeah. But I tell you one thing, when it does happen, you know what, it's going to be somewhere. That's right. It's going to be 420 somewhere. And then Earl Blumenauer even got into it. And he said, very exciting that our champions in the Senate, Senator Schumer, Senator Booker, and Ron Wyden, are prepared to move forward together on comprehensive cannabis legislation. The MORE Act, a product of years of work with advocates, cannabis industry, leaders, and states, is a great foundation. And so the MORE Act is a great reform to reform the 117th Congress. It looks like maybe Senator Wyden, Earl Blumenauer, Republican Representative Blumenauer, has maybe already introduced the MORE Act to the 117th Congress. It's already been January, so that makes a pretty darn good sense. And now let's read the full joint statement as opposed to just the tweets. If you're here for the tweets, give us a thumbs up. Washington, United States Senator Cory Booker, and Ron Wyden, a Democrat of Oregon, and Chuck Schumer, a Democrat of New York, issued the following joint statement regarding comprehensive cannabis reform legislation in the 117th Congress. The war on drugs has been a war on people, particularly people of color. Ending the federal marijuana prohibition is necessary to right the wrongs of this failed war and end the decades of harms inflicted by the communities of color across the country. But that alone is not enough. As states continue to legalize marijuana, we must also enact measures that will lift people up who are unfairly targeted by the war on drugs. We are committed to working together to put forward and advance comprehensive cannabis reform. Isn't it interesting that now they refer to it as cannabis, but in the previous paragraph, they referred to it as marijuana? Cannabis reform legislation that will not only turn the page on this sad chapter in American history, but also undo the devastating consequences of these discriminatory policies. The Senate will make consideration of these reforms a priority. In the early part of this year, we will release a unified discussion draft on comprehensive reform to ensure restorative justice, protect public health, and implement responsible taxes and regulations. Getting input from stakeholder groups will be an important part of developing this critical legislation. So there you go. That's the full statement that the Senate puts out. And it appears that, yes, they are starting to tee this up as making it a very political issue. And it's not just about the cannabis. Unfortunately, it's not really unfortunately. It's the right thing to do to right these wrongs and to create a larger coalition. But I just want to make sure that the patients have access to home grow. So here it is. What are they going to release? In the early part of this year, they're going to release a unified discussion draft. That's why I don't think there's going to be an eminent vote on the MORE Act, because the Senate's not ready for a vote on the MORE Act. They're ready for a unified discussion draft on what? Comprehensive reform to restore restorative justice, promote public health, and implement responsible taxes and regulations. Getting input from stakeholders groups will be an important part of developing this critical legislation. Did you notice they did not mention the word cannabis or marijuana at all in that? Now, I thought it was also interesting that the official statement said both of those things. But if you haven't read the MORE Act, and you should, subscribe to the channel. We'll probably read it one day on the news. We probably already have. But one of the aspects of the MORE Act is it changes the federal term from marijuana, essentially kills the term marijuana at the federal level, because it's just one line in the Controlled Substances Act, in Schedule 1. So it would delete that, and then it would create this new thing called cannabis. And so maybe that's what they were doing in that, because in one paragraph they refer to it as marijuana, but then in the next paragraph they refer to it as cannabis, and the MORE Act calls it cannabis. But it appears that might still take months. Let me just think a little bit about how many months that might take. Yeah, man, that's a lot of months. Well, okay, so they aren't ready for a vote, but they are ready for a unified discussion draft, and then they want to get input from stakeholder groups. And so essentially it appears that the Senate, after the House has already passed the MORE Act, in the last House, they have to pass it again in this one. The Senate now is trying to gauge the room. So they're going to do some talking points to get some input from the stakeholders. So tune in the future episodes in the spring when we go over this particular policy statement, the unified discussion draft of it. And then there'll probably be some calls to action on the channel about where you can go as a stakeholder to voice your support or opposition to this developing critical legislation. And if you think that cannabis legalization is critical legislation, give us a thumbs up, click subscribe, and then also click the bell. Some people do. Oh, and by the way, we got 15,000 subscribers. Awesome. So why don't you join us tomorrow for the news? I've taken my break. That was about 12 hours, minutes. And yeah, wouldn't you just hate to have a lawyer that writes down minutes as hours? Sounds like something Rudy Giuliani would do. 20 grand a day he was charging Donald Trump, who didn't pay him. Hilarious. The last administration was funny, but now we have to do other real things like legalize weed. And we're going to be talking all about that tomorrow. Who is our guest? Join us tomorrow to find out our guest.